Welcome everyone to another episode of the Sports Insiders. I am the one and only Denzel Snipes, and this guy right here is the sports agent himself, Sean Russey. And we are coming to you live on the Sideline Sports Network. Before we get started, just want to remind everyone to follow us on all of our glorious platforms. We are on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, well, X, what we're going to call it, and also on TikTok as well. The 2-for-1 special at Sideline Sports and at Sideline One Sports. So we have a quick show for you. Cowboys Lions is coming up. Yeah, I'm trying to watch that too. So just give us just a few minutes. We'll have you out there to the game. Before we get started, Sean, how you doing tonight, man?
No, I'm doing good, man. No, I'm excited for the 90 points we should see put up tonight.
Yeah, pretty much. Leave your defenses at home. Well, we'll go ahead and get it started with this one. So, Chris Paul reunited with his team from his Lob City days, and then they waived him, and he announced that it was his final season. So, yeah, what was going on with this decision, man? I mean, some people called it a classless move just days after Paul announced his intentions to retire as a Clipper. They kind of have a rep of doing this. Blake Griffin was traded only 5 months into his new deal. He'd also expressed a desire to finish his career as a Clipper. Now the Clippers, they can't just move on from Chris Paul by waiving him because of the fact that their cap apron wouldn't be able to sign a new player until January the 7th, and waiving Paul would put them under required NBA roster limit. Sean, more on this?
Yeah, so I mean, to waive a guy like that at 3 in the morning, I mean, that's when this broke. And I was actually up, burning the midnight oil, doing some recruiting as we do during this time of year. And I clicked over to ESPN and Chris Paul waved, and I'm like, it's like 3 a.m.
Yeah.
Like, what are we doing? Like, I understand it's midnight out west, right? But I believe they had just played a game in Atlanta or were headed to Atlanta. And it's 3 a.m. and you're waving, one of arguably the top three point guards ever to play this game. And I don't understand the move by the Clippers. We'll get into some of the off the stuff that's come out, that the Clippers have kind of tried to, spin this a little bit, but they did the same thing to Blake Griffin, which again, it's like you would think, especially in a league that essentially guys move around and create super teams, that when guys show loyalty, that these organizations would show it back. But this is why these players have such a problem and decide, like, hey, if I have a little nick, I'm not playing for you because look how you
True.
treat me regardless.
Mm-hmm. It's somebody who
Um,
wanted to stay.
yeah, and again, if you're willing to do this to Chris Paul, and for long term, for me, if I'm anybody that's got any sort of name value, and I'm thinking about possibly going to the Clippers, maybe they have a championship roster down the line, and maybe I want to play my last year there. This may stick in my head. Be
Yep.
like, yeah, okay, they did it to Griffin, and maybe there was something, but now they've done it to Chris Paul. Like, okay, so there's no limit to who they won't do this to. Um, and then the rules, yeah, they between the Kawhi contract, the Harden contract, I believe they're still dealing with some of the original Paul George contract, that they had dealt with him on for a while. So they can't even sign a player due to their cap apron. So they
Mm-hmm.
have to either trade Paul 1 for 1, and essentially that player needs an equal salary to Paul, or the other team has to be willing to send the Clippers cash in a difference, or they have to sit till January 7th, and that is the NBA date where, because of the rules they have in place now with the CBA and the cap apron, they would be eligible January 7th because of cap apron averages to then sign a player, which is absolutely asinine. But I understand you can't have the Clippers asking for an exemption on this, because then you're going to have every team doing this and asking for an
And
exemption until January 7th. So, basically they're going to be one player down until the 7th, which I think they're actually fine with. Um, biggest problem that I have with this one is because it's CP3 and because of what he's done, not even for the league, but for the Clippers itself. I mean, think about where the Clippers were before Paul got there.
an afterthought.
Yeah. And then, Jordan was, I believe, drafted by them, and that really started it. And then Griffin. But who led the way the entire time with that team? It was Chris Paul.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And,
I
and
mean,
so, oh,
I
go ahead.
think
I'm
it was
sorry.
the only time. I think it was the only time that, when they shared the arena, that the Clippers, there was more Clippers fans in the building than Lakers fans, and it
Yeah,
was because of CP3. Um, And then so today now it's come out that, oh, he was clashing with Tyronn Lue and his intense attitude is a problem. But you knew this about him.
Yeah, you knew, and you
Um,
brought him back anyway.
yeah,
He
and
never
that's why.
changed. He's been the same man.
Even further than that, he teamed with Harden 6 years ago on the Rockets. They led that team to 56 and 65 wins in the 2 seasons they were together there. You would think Harden would be like, what are we even discussing here? Because they're both obviously different players. We're 6 years removed from that run. But I would have just let him play out the season. Like, where are you going at 5-16 anyways?
Yeah, very true. You know what I mean? And but also there's a bright spot, and that is this opens the door for him to go to a contender. And a lot of buzz that I've been seeing as of late is, what do you think of a Chris Paul Houston reunion? Now, keep in mind that Fred Van Vliet is currently out with a torn ACL. And there's been slight rumblings he might be back for the playoffs, but we're not really expecting him back. But you bring Chris Paul back to Houston. Houston like would needs a point guard, right? You know what I mean? Because we've been kind of winging it at the one. Um, but this is the city that outside of Phoenix got pretty damn close to a championship.
Yeah, and you don't want, if you're the Rockets, you don't want to get into a position where you're unintentionally wearing down KD by making him play point forward again.
Right.
He's not his younger self at Golden State and Oklahoma City. You don't want him becoming Paulo and Franz Wagner, bringing the ball up the floor. Um, you know, over the course of the season, for a couple of weeks it's okay, but over the course of the season, I think they'll pay for that in the playoffs when KD starts wearing down a little bit because of his age. But I think you bring Paul in, you keep KD where he's just the shooter and the offensive guy, and not having to direct the team coming up the floor a little bit. And I think that plays a lot better. And I think, for Paul's sake, I think it's one of the better options out there. I've also heard Dallas, but I think Dallas is just such a mess right now. For if I'm Paul, I'm not going anywhere near Dallas. If I
Yeah.
really want one more ring, if that's what this is about, I'm not sure if that was what was going back to what the Clippers was about. I think that was just he wanted to finish and be loyal to the Clippers, and obviously that backfired on him. If that's not what it's about for CP3, I would love to see him go to like Memphis, that's in a rebuild, and help the young guys.
They help the young
Um,
dudes, yeah.
but I think it really depends what he wants at this point, because that's really what his legacy's been the last couple of years. And Wembanyama credits his big leap really for Chris Paul.
Yeah.
And Chris Paul helped that team get to where it is right now. And
Mm-hmm.
they're competing in the West right now, even with Wembanyama out, they're still competing. And a lot of that is the lessons Chris Paul left that young team. So I could see him going that direction too. But I would like to see it either kind of Houston or Memphis. A lot of the other teams I've heard mentioned make sense, but then it's like it would just be like a show. Like why would you even go to the Lakers? I understand you're friends with LeBron, but like you really want to come off the bench for about 7 minutes? Like I don't think that's the move for him if he wants to wrap this up. And more so, I think at this point, how bad do you want to stick it back to the Clippers for the rest of the season?
True. Yep. Very, very, very true on that one. Well, with that, I mean, wherever he lands, whether he lands somewhere where he's going to be, well, he's going to be in the leadership role regardless, you kind of figure, right? But it's either he's going to go to a rebuilding squad or he's going to go to like a contender.
Yeah, and
Me
he's
personally,
got to go somewhere strong like Houston because KD knows who he is. The coaching staff understands like he's going to come in and he's going to demand even perfection from KD. Like he's got that mentality about him, but that's a benefit to have an extra coach on the floor.
yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone knows that he's one of the great offensive minds. You talk about running an offense. A true floor general. Chris Paul has always been that guy. But going on to our next topic here, and now it's a little bit about Brandon Aiyuk. He's been fined by the 49ers. Reports have surfaced of the Niners fining Aiyuk hefty amounts and voiding guarantees on his contract for failure to report the therapy sessions and other injury-related appointments. John Lynch says the first time the Niners had ever had to use the rule at their disposal for this type of situation, but he felt the message had to be sent: you must follow the team's orders when injured. More on that, Sean?
Yeah, so it's kind of odd timing too, right? Because these fines apparently got handed down in July and his guarantees were voided in August. So you kind of wonder, why did someone sit on this and release it now when the Niners are in the midst of a 9-4 run and going to have some crucial games coming up? And it's kind of clear that whether this is Aiyuk was, the way him saying like, yeah, I signed here, but I thought I was going to be healthy enough to be traded, and now I really don't want to be here. And that was his attitude because he hasn't even had his practice window opened. So, we're talking another week or two, and he's not going to play this year.
Yeah.
So his value is in the tank. I think he thought he was going to be healthy enough for preseason. I don't know if that played a role in him making this decision, but based on what we saw last year from him in demanding the new contract and the tweets and the IG
And he
and the
got his
girlfriend,
money. Yeah.
yeah, and the girlfriend getting involved, and he still got the contract. I think it really just screams he never wanted to be in San Francisco. He wanted them to work out a deal with somewhere. But then, as we reported on this show last year, he declined a trade to New England. Can you imagine how regretful he is of that now, seeing how Drake May is playing?
Yeah, exactly. He really could have been out there shining in New England.
And
Now,
it was over like a couple. The difference was a couple $1 million, and now they're going to be lucky to maybe trade him to the Commanders for a 6th rounder because that's where the old Niners GM who actually drafted Aiyuk is. So that's
yep,
probably his best case scenario right now.
yep, where Niner players go to die, hence Debo Samuel. Uh, yeah, and then let's see here. Well, moving on to our next topic here. Who knows what the future holds for Brandon Ayuk? I mean, he could heal up. The thing to New England, it still could be a thing, but yeah, I'm guessing he's regretful of this right now, especially since they got a young. Because I mean, before Diggs got there, Drake May was kind of throwing to nobody's, right?
Yep,
He
and
really,
they probably, if playing devil's advocate, they probably don't go sign Diggs if they bring in Ayuk. They'll still have Booty and Pops there, but I don't even think they need to bring in Diggs if they sign a guy like Ayuk because he would be your veteran guy at 27 versus having to go grab Diggs at 31.
yeah.
It changes a lot of things for both teams.
It does. It does, absolutely. And finally, we are going to touch on our NCAA football conference championships and CFP predictions. Championship weekend, as a matter of fact, because it starts Friday night. But it's championship weekend is going to determine the paths of a lot of teams here. So currently, 1 through 12, we got 1 Ohio State, 2 Indiana, 3 Georgia, 4 Texas Tech, 5 Oregon, 6 Ole Miss. 7 A&M, 8 Oklahoma, 9 Alabama, 10 Notre Dame, 11 and 12 will be conference champs number 4 and 5, assumingly the group. I think there's only one group of 5 champion that's allowed in. Now you look at these matchups here. BYU and Texas Tech. Texas Tech is finally good, people. You know, after having been mid-tier to bottom to mid-tier Big 12 school, they're actually good this season, and they have a chance to actually win a conference championship. Then you move on to the old school heavyweight fight for the SEC title between Georgia and Alabama. Um, Texas A&M being upset by Texas helped that to happen. All A&M needed was a victory in Austin. However, Arch Manning and company did not let that occur. For the first time in Big Ten championship game history, number 1 will face number 2, Ohio State facing Indiana. Then in I think it's it's the American Athletic Conference Championship. North Texas, how about that? The Mean Green facing the Tulane Green Wave. And then for the ACC Championship, no, this is not Florida State involved. It's not Virginia Tech involved. It's not Clemson involved. It's not even Georgia Tech involved. This is weird, Sean. It has to
Yeah.
be like another universe or something like that. I want people to understand and hear me. This is not no typos. We aren't paid actors or anything like that. The ACC championship game is between Duke and number 18 Virginia. So your thoughts about that?
Yeah, so I mean, it's amazing how bad that SMU loss basically crushed Miami's chances of the CFP and the conference championship. They lost the tiebreaker with Duke, even though they've got the same record as Virginia overall at 10-2. They've got a 6-2 conference record, and the loss to SMU really kind of did them in there. But so it's expected. Most people think Virginia is going to win that game, so Virginia will clinch the 12, or excuse me, the 11, and then Tulane is expected to beat North Texas and be the 12. So this is where it gets interesting for me. If North Texas beats Tulane, we'll still say Virginia's going to win because I don't think Duke's winning that game.
Yeah, I got
If
Virginia circled.
BYU beats Texas Tech, I don't really think that Texas Tech is obviously going to drop out of the top four. I think you have to put BYU in at that point.
You have to
Um,
because because the power four conference champions, you gotta let them in. And
yep,
BYU is they're not even in the 12. So yeah,
they're
you
not in
have
it
to
right
jump
now,
them.
so they
You
can
have to
throw a
jump.
wrench in everything in terms of what Tulane is looking at because Tulane's the out at large bid, but that's with a BYU loss.
That's what a BYU lost exactly. And then not only that, but think about that. Think about what message that sends for a second. To be a Power Four school and the conference champion is not in the CFP when it blatantly states, "Hey, automatic bids are your conference champions for the Power
Yeah,
Four." So how do BYU win the Big 12 and not get let into the CFP? You got to jump them and you have to put them in. Those are the rules. That's what they stated, right?
yep, and I think they'll look at this in a couple of years and we'll be up to 14 or 16 to kind of straighten that out so every conference champion has a spot.
They're
And I
already
don't think
looking at 16. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think it hurts them to go to an even number. I don't know necessarily if the bye weeks really do anything other than extending out which bowls we occupy for these CFP games. And in terms of the other games, so another one that could really flip the top four, if Alabama upsets Georgia, neither one of them will leave the CFP, but then you have an argument to put Alabama in the top four, especially if Tech loses. Georgia
Yeah.
would fall out of the top four, regardless
Hmm.
who wins that Tech game. You're looking at Oregon possibly moving in, or maybe Ole Miss moving into the top four with a Georgia loss. Ohio and
Right.
Indiana, they're just going to flip 1 and 2 if Indiana wins that game. Neither
Pretty
of those
much.
teams is dropping below number two. It's
Now,
crazy the run that Indiana has been on. I don't think anybody expected to see number two Indiana at the beginning of this season. But we'll
now
see what
go.
they do here. Because if they can go in the CFP number one, I mean that's a hell of a confidence boost. You're going in the CFP not only beating Ohio State, but you're the number one ranked team.
The number one ranked team. Now, question for you: if Texas Tech loses the Big 12 championship game, do they tumble out of the 12, or are they still in?
I think you'll see Notre Dame move up to like 8, and then you'll have Texas Tech at like 10.
And then also because of a particular signing this past week, this creates the interesting aspect of Ole Miss, quite possibly because they're the number 16, making the CFP without their head coach Lane Kiffin. He already announced he's not coaching any more Ole Miss games this season.
Yeah, I mean they basically told him to get out. I don't blame them. For me, for Kiffin, it kind of seems to be like teams should know, like, okay, yeah, we're gonna get a couple good years, and then he's gonna Montreal Bret Hart us at the end.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And that's
we just got
sad
to be
too
prepared
because
for that part of it. But I really wish some of these coaches would sit back and just be like, hey, your job's going to be open in a month, right? Let me finish this. Let's
yeah,
just keep this quiet. You're a big school. You don't need to fill the opening. You're not going anywhere. You're not in the CFP. Why do I need to leave Ole Miss right now? And again, for me, it's just stains on his own reputation. Now, he's going to get hired regardless. I do wonder how many more times he could do this that teams will continue to be like, yeah, come in and leave us hanging at the end.
this includes the
Um,
NFL too. Don't forget his tenure with the Raiders.
yeah, no, and it's a track record at this point, right? First couple
Yeah,
of years are great. He starts to improve the team, and then he looks to improve his own situation.
yeah. And if I'm not mistaken, Ole Miss was trending upward too because didn't they have? Isn't this their second straight 10-win season? So
Yeah,
you
and they've
kind of
they've had
figure.
one of the best recruiting classes. They've got a quarterback in
Mhm.
waiting on top of the guy they've got right now, but they've got a quarterback in waiting that's got high praise coming out of high school. So I mean, he was doing doing what he was doing in terms of he's always been a great recruiter. He's always put good teams together. Now on to greener pastures for him.
Yeah, well, greener pastures. Yeah, I don't forget how he left Tennessee high and dry to leave for the bright lights of Los Angeles.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you figure you're trending upward. You find a way to beat Bama and Georgia, in that conference, and you're like right there. They were in contention up until the last week, the last game, matter of fact,
No,
for
and for
to make the SEC title game.
for me, and I would hate to see this happen, but based on how we've seen coaches leave and then based on what things all of a sudden come out 2 months later, I
Hmm.
would hate to see in 2 months, or I would hate to say I'm expecting it, but some sort of violations he caused at Ole Miss or whatever he may have done under the radar that was maybe starting to get scraped up, and he's like, I gotta go. Um,
Hmm.
but we've seen it with Pete Carroll before. We've seen it with Jim Harbaugh. We've seen it with multiple coaches. Um, right before the hammer drops, they go to a different school.
Yeah, and before we wrap things up, okay, so real quick, we got number 11 versus number 4 for the Big 12 championship game. So if BYU loses, they will tumble out. They're out of it. Okay. Now I'm gonna bring up 3 teams. Okay, and you let me know if there's a chance if you could pick any one of these 3 teams, which one of them could slip in. Okay, this is Miami at 12, Texas at 13, Vanderbilt at 14. Now you figure someone's got to lose here, but we already pretty much established whether Ohio State or Indiana loses, they're not going to tumble out. Georgia, if they lose, they're not tumbling out. Alabama would take a pretty hard hit if they lose. A&M is pretty much solidified to be in. So is Ole Miss. So is Oklahoma. But if any one of those 3 teams, Miami, Texas, or Vanderbilt, should sneak their way into it, which team is it? Or do you have multiple teams?
So for me, and this is not a knock on how Texas finished the season, I just don't think they're strong enough to put in there. I think it would, whoever they would face would kind of, manhandle them essentially. I think Manning's shown that he's been inconsistent and not ready. I honestly think it would be a bad game for Manning on even a bigger stage than what we've seen for him this year. And he's had some bad games on national TV this year. Um, I would have to go with Miami in that situation, but I think it takes a Georgia blowout of Alabama to knock Alabama all the way down.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and you know what? To be fair, um,
Now, if
Manning
BYU
did.
if
Man,
BYU squeaks by Texas,
mhm.
there's an argument to be made. Obviously you've got to put them in, but there be an argument to be made if Georgia blows out Alabama, BYU squeaks by Texas Tech, then there's an argument to be made there. I think that you move, potentially move Alabama out at that
Alabama
point.
out. Yeah,
Yeah.
but then you're looking at moving up Miami, Texas, or even Vanderbilt. Now, I will say this much about Manning. He did beat OU, who's in the college football playoff. He did beat A&M, who's in the college football playoff. Both of them were on national stages. You know, me personally, I think that, and I'm hoping that they do make it as a Longhorns fan, but I think that they'll finish just outside of it because they're not going to stop reminding them of that loss to Florida.
Yeah, I think that's a tough one, and they that opening game where they pulled it off. It was I just think you saw his jitters, and I think that's why he's staying in school. We can talk more about Manning on a different show, but I think he's just he's just needs a little more comfortability to be right there with considered what would have been considered the top college quarterbacks this year.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, it runs in his family. I'm sure he'll figure it out. But I would prefer Miami or Vandy for sure, just because of that. I think Texas has to kind of sloppy the game up a little bit because of Manning. Um, but I think it'd be Miami or Vandy in that situation. But I think Alabama really needs to get destroyed to fall out of it.
To fall out of it,
Um,
yeah. And also, to be fair, Vanderbilt does have a quarterback who might be seeing a trip to New York City here in a few weeks.
yeah, and Vandy's a very impressive offense. They've played, and obviously have had a tough schedule, racked up a lot of wins, some tough losses there down the stretch. But, that's another argument to be made for sure, because I think if you put Vandy up against Miami, they may go 6-4 in 10 games.
Yeah, 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 absolutely. Well, I mean, Vanderbilt. Well, you figure they're 10-2. Miami's 10-2. You
Hmm.
know, Notre Dame. Notre Dame certainly is going to be in my.
Yeah, I
They're
mean,
gonna find a
and
way.
like I said,
They're gonna find a way to put Notre Dame in.
if you're looking at losses, if they judge it based off, you know, predicted games that they should have won but lost, I think they'll give the edge to Vandy,
Yeah,
because my that SMU game I think is just really going to hurt Miami if that's what it comes down to.
yeah.
Um, they really needed that one, and then again, then at that point you're not even talking about them. You're probably talking about Vandy being in because the Miami's in the conference championship game, so they probably help out both teams if they just not drop the game to
If they just not
SMU.
drop the game. Yeah, exactly. Now, before we wrap up, one team that we did not mention, and that's number 5, Oregon. How do you think they fare out?
I think they have a chance, especially if they end up playing Texas Tech. I expect that to be a high scoring game, but I think they'll fall short on the road. But I think they'll hold their own against whoever they end up playing. Now, if let's say, like you said, if we end up with a new number 4 in there, let's say Alabama beats Georgia, I give Oregon a whole different chance against of number 4 Alabama team.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's our show, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry we ran a little bit long on time. Cowboys Lions on right now. I'm about to go watch it. But for Sean Rossi, I am Denzel Snipes. We will see you all next week for more Sports Insiders.